And I'm going to invite Commissioner Brown up to the dais, if she wouldn't mind. Good morning, everybody.
For me and you lost yourself.
And welcome to the March 29th meeting of the Yellow Russian River Commission. I'd like to first invite Commissioner Crandall from Lake County. It's his first meeting. It's great to meet you, Eddie, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
And I would also like to say that, well, let's do the roll call. I will have a slight change to the agenda, just so you know. Okay. So, can we do the roll call, please, Kathy?
Okay.
Oh, Brooke, sorry.
Commissioner Crandall from Lake County. Here. Commissioner Carrie Brown from Mendocino County.
Here.
Commissioner Gore from Sonoma County.
Absent.
Commissioner Fennell from Humboldt County.
Here. Thank you very much, Brooke. And by the way, this is Brooke. She's part of our clerk of the board team. The next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
Chair, I would like to just, on agenda item number 7, it was discussion regarding the administrative duties. And it's somewhat wrong. It's not that they were handled by the chair of whoever was chair in the county administration, but the administrative duties, and it's what former Commissioner Jimmy Smith told me when he acted as chair. You do everything as chair. You know, you set the meetings. And so anyway, it doesn't need to be changed. We'll just leave it like it is. But I just want, once again, to say when you take over chair, you do the agenda, you get the speakers, you know, all those things that you do. Because you're basically the administrative staff, since we really haven't any, except a clerk.
Yeah, and we got a good team here. Thank you very much.
So I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Any public comment on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I just wanted to do a brief addition to the agenda. I had also we have the We Are Tribe with Tim Nelson presenting. We also heard back from the Round Valley Indian Tribe, and Doug Hutt will be making a presentation on behalf of the Round Valley Indian Tribe directly after the We Are Tribe, so that'll be item G1. Okay, so here we go. Speaking of the transition and who administers the commission, we have transitioned out people who wanted to see what the records were, etc. Went to the Mendocino County website and got a message saying it's in Humboldt County now. So I'd like to have a presentation from our clerk of the board on the new administration plan for Eel Russian River Commission. And I welcome Kathy Hayes, our clerk of the board.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. First of all, I would like to introduce our administrative support team, clerk of the board staff, that will be supporting your commission over the next year. First of all, Brooke Eberhardt is our deputy clerk who is clerking the meeting today. Tracy D'Amico is another deputy clerk in our office, as well as Ryan Sharp, who is the deputy clerk in our office. This comprises our board and clerk of the board team here in Humboldt County, and we are eager and anxious to help all of you with the work of the commission. So I wanted to introduce them to you to let you know that if you have any questions, anyone needs anything related to the Eel Russian River Commission and the work that needs to be done, they can call any one of us here in Humboldt County, and we'd be more than happy to help you. Now to get back to the update of where we are. First of all, Commissioner Brown, I would like to thank you and your staff for the work that you've been doing over the last few years to support the work of the commission. please thank Carla for me, and thank you, Commissioner Brown. We're still transitioning. What you will see is on the Humboldt County website, we've created the Russian River Commission. We are adding things to that site to make it more accessible for not only your commission, but also members of the public. Currently, we have the agendas starting this year when we took over support for the commission. We will be backloading agendas, minutes, things that we get from Mendocino County. Once we receive all that information, we will be uploading that to the website as well. We've had a few calls from individuals asking for information, and once we receive it, we will be uploading it, and it will be available to the public. We also have a roster of your commission that shows your terms. So anyone interested in your service when you came onto the Russian River Commission, that information is on the website as well. And we can also help individuals navigate our websites. Everyone's website's a little bit different. It's a little difficult sometimes for members of the public to find what they're looking for. So please refer them to us, and we'll be glad to help them find the information that they're looking for. So with that, I'll turn it back over to your commission. Just wanted to let you know we're excited to be supporting the work that you do, and feel free to call us with questions or anything that we can do to help you.
Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you guys just jumping in, and Carrie is right. There is a lot of work involved in it, and I'm learning that more and more. Thank you. So our next item on the agenda actually is we're trying to get things a little bit more solidly set up, because there is a lot there is a lot to be discussed as we move forward. So I have worked with the clerk on meeting dates for 2019. And so I was just wondering, you've all seen it. Has anybody got any ideas on whether or not those work for you? And I'll call them out. So there's today meeting here, May 24th in Lake County, August 23rd in Mendocino County, and November 22nd in Sonoma County. I think it's worked for everybody. Is that?
So far, they work for me.
Okay, great. So,
Unfortunately, might have some issues with May 24th, but I'm
May-
trying to clear it up.
okay.
So I'll be,
You want us to change it, or just clear it? Clear your, let's,
I mean, how would you like to do it? Because I don't think it's going to work, but do you want to do that here right now? Do you want to follow
no,
up
no,
with
no.
staff?
No, what I would recommend now is that we okay all of the other three, of the other two, and then we'll work on the May meeting, and we'll let people know about that as soon as possible.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for reference, somebody was asking for to hear what I had said. I was saying that the May 24th time doesn't look like it works for me, so we're going to, I think the motion would be to, if you want me to make it a
Please do.
motion. So I move to approve the second two dates later in the year as prescribed by the chair of the commission. The May 24th date will work with staff to either confirm that it will be that date if I can clear the schedule, and if not, find a different time.
Great. Sounds
So I have a
good.
second?
And I'll second.
Thank you.
We have a second? Is it?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Eddie. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. That gives us a level of certainty, and we can make our plans. So on to item number E, PG&E. Alison Talbot is the Public Affairs Director for PG&E here, and she's going to give us an update regarding recent announcements from PG&E regarding the Potter Valley project, and anything else she wants to tell us. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners and Chair. I'm Allison Talbot.
Is it on? Bruce, do you want to help?
Testing.
Yeah.
Good? Okay, thank you. Again, good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Allison Talbot with PG&E. Typically, my coworkers, Mike Schoner and Paul Kubicek, would be here to present information to you. Unfortunately, they each had previously scheduled engagements today. They did ask me, really, to send their apologies and that they couldn't be here to share their updates. I'm going to present a very brief summary on their behalf. I'll do my best to answer any questions, but as I'm not an expert on either of their fields of study, I have a feeling my role will likely be to collect questions and ensure that you receive a prompt response. I will begin with a very brief update on the compliance studies. License compliance studies under the FERC project license and the RPA continue as required. Are we trying to avoid acronyms? Should I say that one again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Under
At least once.
right, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's project license and the reasonable and prudent alternative of, the National Marine Fisheries Service's biological opinion continue as required. Since the last commission meeting in November, the following items are of note. It has been a good water year thus far. Lake Pillsbury filled to the level of the spillway in mid-January and has been spilling ever since. Peak flow in the Eel River below Cape Horn Dam in late February was in excess of 30,000 CFS. Adult fish returns to the Van Arsdale Fishery Station at Cape Horn Dam have been relatively low this spawning season, 95 Chinook salmon and 159 steelhead thus far. The Chinook salmon run is over for the season and the steelhead run should continue into April. The fish ladder at Cape Horn Dam was out of service from February 24th until March 16th due to deposition of gravel, cobble, and small boulders in the lower portion of the ladder during exceptionally high storm flows. Once the flows receded, the ladder was cleaned out during the week of March 11th using divers, a vacuum truck, and an excavator. Finally, on this topic, all relicensing studies were stopped as of January 25th when PG&E announced its decision to discontinue project relicensing. We are working to tie up that data and make it available to interested parties, but I feel like I have to admit I don't know the status of that. It could even have been provided, some of it already. I didn't have an opportunity to check with my coworkers. So as you know, a lot has changed for PG&E in the path for the Potter Valley project over the last few months. PG&E withdrew from the relicensing effort, terminated the sale process, and entered into bankruptcy. Additionally, the FERC recently issued its guidelines to parties interested in obtaining a new license for the project. As was discussed at Congressman Huffman's last ad hoc meeting following PG&E's bankruptcy filing, PG&E's primary role going forward is to operate and maintain the project in accordance with the current license until a new license is issued and the project is transferred to a new owner or until the project is decommissioned. Although PG&E, we are interested in the outcome of FERC's process to seek a new licensee, we're no longer in a position to actively participate in another entity's licensing process. We're working now to more clearly define how we'll engage with potential new licensees. I expect the role will largely be limited to ministerial items like providing data, answering factual questions, and coordinating access to lands and facilities for potential licensees. The FERC Orphan Project process will provide an opportunity for interested parties to obtain the new license for the project. Again, PG&E will continue to own and operate the project in accordance with the terms and conditions of the current license and all laws, rules, and regulations governing the operation of the project until a new license is issued or the project is decommissioned. My understanding is that the initiation of the orphan process included the 90-day period for entities to submit a notice of interest to seek a new project license, followed by an 18-month period for interested parties to submit an actual license application. All licensing stakeholders will have the opportunity to participate in the FERC licensing process. Should the orphan process not yield a new licensee for the project, PG&E expects that the FERC will order us to submit a surrender application and decommissioning plan for the project. The decommissioning process is effectively the relicensing process in reverse. Through that process, all stakeholders, including environmental groups, water users, recreationists, tribes, and others who receive benefits from the project, would participate in FERC's determination of the actions necessary to remove the project from service. To conclude, I would like to formally thank you for keeping this venue available for information sharing and collaboration. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you this morning, and please let me know if I can answer any questions or get you answers to any questions.
Thank you, Allison. Does anybody have questions or comments for Allison on this? Thank you, Allison. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it, and I agree with you. It's a good venue for the exchange of information. It's really valuable, invaluable for all of us interested to hear how things are going with PG&E. And I look forward to the next meeting when we'll be able to pepper the guys with questions.
Thank
We'll let you off easy. Is there any public comment on this item?
Good morning, Commissioner Fennell and Commissioners. Vivian Hellewell, Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations. And thank you, Allison, for the PG&E report. I have a question that comes to mind about how effective the management of Lake Mendocino is going along with the new forecast-informed reservoir operations known as FERO. We got a good report in the news after the first storm that they were able to save and hold back 2 billion gallons of water, enough for 50,000 people for a year, because they didn't have to release on a certain date, but only had to release when there were storms forecast. Later, we had a big flood, and I wonder how well that worked. Now, we're all interested in this because it's part of the system of water where the Eel River water goes to the Russian River. I don't know if PG&E has an answer to that question, and maybe it's more appropriate for Sonoma County Water Agency. I'll just put it out there, and we can see if we can find out more information about that forecast-informed reservoir operation at Lake Mendocino.
Thank you, Vivian. Commissioner Brown?
That is not within, I believe, PG&E's focus. And it would be Sonoma County Water Agency, City of Ukiah. There's a number of entities that work with Scripps and USGS on this. It is the first in the nation. Instead of going by old control manuals, they're looking at weather forecast, and for very good reason. And yes, there were floods, but we had those atmospheric rivers that caused a lot of havoc. But it could be an agenda item next time, and we can address it. I think Jay Jaspers has the best handle on it because they're meeting all the time. Ashley, I met with the Corps yesterday and got a very good report.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Maybe I could just add is that, it's a very good question, and it's a really important thing, not just for our region and watersheds, but also nationwide in the management of reservoirs. As you say, is that it's easy for us to look at the Army Corps of Engineers and say, you're working off of rule curve and manuals from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and that doesn't fit current world. But obviously, they look back and say, well, if you want us to hold more water in or otherwise, then we need a different solution, because as we know, the Army Corps doesn't say, we'll figure out the different solution. So therefore, not just millions, but tens of millions of dollars into X-band radars and, throughout the system up and down that is able to forecast to atmospheric rivers, which are at a lower altitude than kind of our regular storms of the past. And therefore, also the Army Corps saying, okay, good job, you've proven all this out, we'll process a major deviation, which is about 11,000 acre feet and change, which is really important because we all know what happened in about 2012, 2013, when we dumped, or the Army Corps dumped, about 20,000 plus acre feet of water, and it didn't rain for 4 years. And the forecasts were all clear going after that. So it's really, it's rational. It's taken a lot of time and money, but it's paying out. So.
Yeah, well, so I'll definitely add this as an agenda item then on our next meeting. And thank you very much again, Allison. I don't think we need a motion to accept that, or do you want to?
You can just.
There's a motion to accept the report. Thank you very much. So that takes us on to our next one, which is from Humboldt County. And we'll have a presentation from Hank Seaman, which is our Deputy Director of Public Works, and Craig Tucker, who is our Water Resources Consultant.
Good morning, members of the commission. Thanks for the opportunity to give this presentation. My name is Craig Tucker. I'm a consultant for Humboldt County working on the Potter Valley project. I got engaged as part of the relicensing process, which has now significantly changed. So I want to go through and give you a presentation that in some ways is similar to the other presentations you'll see today, with a little bit of background and a little bit of what the expectations are going forward. But I think each one of these presentations will be from a particular perspective. And so I'm going to try to tell the story from Humboldt County's perspective, and I know other folks up here will come up here and give the perspective from where they live in the basin and the constituents they represent.
Madam Chair,
Absolutely. Thank you for noticing.
do we have the hard copy, or is this another PowerPoint?
This is a copy of the Eel River Recovery Project, but Craig, I'm sure you could make a copy
Well,
of it.
they'll probably be on the website, but I just saw these here and wanted to ask that question. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, Craig.
If you have any problems, I'm happy to email it straight to you. I would just start by giving a little bit of the geography, which I think most people are familiar with. The Potter Valley project really serves to wed the Eel River Valley and the Russian Valley together, and has formed basically a long-term relationship between our two river basins. On the left, you kind of see that, On the left, you see the entire two basins and how they're connected, and a little bit of a blow-up on the right of how the plumbing has connected the Eel River to the East Fork of the Russian River. Just as a review, there's two major dams that are part of this project. The uppermost dam is Scott Dam, which creates Pillsbury Reservoir. It's the bigger of the two. It was the second one built, and it was really built in order to facilitate the diversion operating on a year-round basis. The smaller, lower, older Cape Horn Dam creates Van Arsdale Reservoir. It's substantially smaller. It does have fish passage facilities in contrast to Scott Dam. And I just draw your attention to look at the, on the right, there's this, the fish ladder goes up into this gallery. And I'm just going to have a slide later where I'll show you some blow-ups of that and how it can be problematic. The project was constructed in the early 1900s. And really, the relationship from Humboldt County's perspective in a lot of ways has been something of an abusive relationship. And that is to say that to date, the folks on the Russian River side have received the benefits of the project, but on the Humboldt side, we've really seen this project contribute to a diminishment in fisheries resources. And I think that's what we're trying to get at with this concept of the two-basin solution. The project operated for 60 or 70 years before there were significant changes made, and so modern environmental laws sort of forced the hands of regulatory agencies starting in the late 70s and early 80s, and biological opinions, FERC license obligations, and other things have led the project to change quite a bit. So as I said, historically, the Eel River Valley has suffered significant fisheries impacts. Early in the project, for the first 60 or 70 years of the project, this included an impairment of flows. That's really changed, and I'll point that out in a future slide. But we know there's somewhere around 200 to 300 miles of habitat upstream of the dams that can provide spawning and rearing habitat for salmonids. The dams affect the thermal regime in the river, they affect sediment transport in the river, and contributes to the problem with the invasive pike minnow in the river and the reservoirs. On the Russian River side, there's actually significant benefits. The diversions have allowed, aside from energy generation, which is really today a secondary benefit of the project, the primary benefit of the project has been for water diversions to Potter Valley Irrigation District and it adds to the water supply for the Sonoma County Water Agency. As I was saying, that these benefits to the Rush River side have really diminished over time. So when the project was originally constructed, we were diverting somewhere around 150,000 acre-feet of water from the Eel River watershed over to the Russian. Changes in biological opinions and in-stream flow requirements to the Eel have really changed that. And today we're diverting about 64,000 on average acre-feet of water over to the Russian River side. With the diminishment in water diversions, you also have a diminishment in power production. So the power production has been cut in more than half since the project was built. And I'll talk a little bit about that as I go, because I think the water piece is a very important one. And the way the water piece factors into our thinking about the biological impacts are one of the reasons why I think a two-basin solution is truly possible. I just wanted to point out that there is fish passage at Van Arsdale, but it's really problematic. This year, for somewhere around 3 weeks, the fish ladders were not usable. So at really high flows, the fish ladders just fill in with the gravel. And the fear of that and the fact that the ladder doesn't really accommodate passage, it flows over 2,000 CFS, means that they just shut down the ladder. And this is in the wintertime when winter steelhead would be migrating and using the ladders. So in addition to the fish impairments and lack of passage at Scott Dam, we have some similar problems at Van Arsdale that would have to be solved under any future licensing scenario. So as Congressman Jared Huffman has shown quite a bit of leadership on this issue, and he began an ad hoc committee called the Ad Hoc Committee, and proposed a document that creates the guidelines and principles for a two-basin solution. And this two-basin solution has what he calls co-equal goals. And so the co-equal goals are to improve fish passage and habitat on the Eel River, and we actually call it support recovery of naturally reproducing, self-sustaining, and harvestable populations of native anadromous fish. We'd like to achieve that goal while at the same time minimizing or avoiding adverse impacts to the water supply needs on the Russian River side. The good news is, I think most of the experts would tell you that the impacts to the Eel River is really not exactly about the water. In other words, if we're diverting somewhere around 60,000 acre-feet of water over to the Russian every year, the Eel River carries about 6.5 million acre-feet of water every year. So it's a proverbial drop in the bucket, so to speak. The timing of the diversion is really important, but since the biological opinion from, I think, 2002 was instituted, the flows in the Eel River today mimic what the natural state would be. In other words, the flows we see in the Eel River today look a lot like what flows would look like without the dams in place. And so I show you here a graph from 2008 and 2011. These are 2 years with very different hydrology, but you can see that the flows observed as compared to what the natural flow would have been are very similar. So I think this creates an opportunity for solving the problem and meeting the co-equal goals specified by the congressman. There's been quite a bit of work to figure out the fish passage problem. So if the water flow isn't the issue, fish passage is, how do we solve that problem? And the ad hoc group has spent quite a bit of time, and they're still working on this issue to figure out what the pros and cons of different fish passage strategies are. Similarly, in this ad hoc group, there's a water supply group that has modeled the plumbing and how changes in dam operations, removal or partial removal of facilities affect the water supply for folks in Potter Valley and folks in Sonoma County. I think one of the key, and I hope folks from Sonoma County Water Agency will speak to this more, one of the key findings of this modeling was that you could remove Scott Dam, which is the bigger dam, the one that causes the biggest problem for fish passage, maintain a winter diversion at the lower Van Arsdale Dam, and really meet Sonoma County Water Agency's needs if you consider that Coyote Dam is currently, they're considering changes to dam operations are forecast-based, as folks alluded to earlier. But in the middle of all this, and I'm getting close to the wrap-up here, in the middle of all this, PG&E has really made it difficult. So PG&E started by applying for a new license, then PG&E announced they were going to sell the project, and then PG&E announced they're just going to orphan the project, declare bankruptcy, and try to walk away from it. This, I think, has created a lot of challenges for the ad hoc group. Without PG&E's leadership kind of convening this group is a little bit of a challenge. The orphaning process is interesting, and it's one that's been used by PG&E before. And in these smaller power projects that are over 100 years old, they're starting to age out. In other words, the infrastructure isn't designed to last forever to begin with. We have a regulatory landscape that's really different today than it was when the project was built at the turn of the 20th century. So what you have are these small projects that really don't pay for themselves. In other words, upgrading the project, the cost of those upgrades, and complying with modern environmental laws like the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act can cost more than the electricity that you generate from the project. As Ms. Talbot mentioned earlier, if no one steps in to take over the project, FERC will order PG&E to decommission this project. But I think this new orphaned process that we're having to figure out how to navigate now creates some opportunities. So I'm a recovering biochemist, and I love flow charts, so I couldn't resist making a flow chart. So if you orphan the project, there's really two possibilities here, and one is a new party could come in and file a notice of intent and file a new license application. If no one does that, FERC will order a decommissioning. If someone does file a new license application, FERC may accept it and start the relicensing process anew, or FERC could reject it, and then we're still going back to the decommissioning process. So I think this creates three opportunities for stakeholders to engage with one another to develop this two-basin solution. One is we could negotiate and work together to file a new license application. So maybe one party wants to file a license application. They work with the rest of us to come up with the terms of that application. We submit it to FERC. When we go through the process, and the outcome kind of meets the goals of the two-basin process. Another is we let someone, or someone steps forward, files a new license application that FERC accepts, and then we all engage in that licensing process, kind of like we did with PG&E originally, and there we would make our case for the two-basin solution goals. And then finally, even if FERC either rejects a new license application or no one files one and they order a decommissioning, that still has an opportunity for stakeholders to be engaged. Even if you decommission the power generational capacity of the project, you could see an outcome where the project is maintained just for a water transfer project. So I think how we navigate this is yet to be determined. And I think it will be really influenced by what parties step up to file a notice of intent. And hopefully whoever does file this notice of intent will be open to working with Humboldt County and the tribes and the other entities on the Eel River side to develop a license application that meets our goals of a two-basin solution. And I think I will stop there.
Any questions or comments for Craig or Hank? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Craig. I will open up.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. You said Sonoma County Water Agency, great benefits from the diversion. But it's also Mendocino County. It's not just Sonoma County. In fact, our entire communities in the Russian River watershed all the way to the Mendocino line going into Sonoma is very dependent on diverted water and then going through Potter Valley, stored in Lake Mendocino. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Commissioner Gore?
Yeah, I was waiting to see what you had to say too. Similarly, I mean, from my perspective, I represent District 4, Northern Sonoma County. Really, the Sonoma County Water Agency doesn't enter until Dry Creek. Yes, ma'am. Really, yes, absolutely. Sorry about that. I represent northern Sonoma County, and by way of context, really any water that touches or connects with what's called the Sonoma County Water Agency, or more recently Sonoma Water, starts post-Healdsburg. So we actually, the Russian River and the sustained flows are dependent upon by Windsor, Healdsburg, Geyserville, Cloverdale, all of Alexander Valley, partially of Russian River Valley, and all of those as well. I think it's appropriately put. The other thing that isn't up there, and I don't mean this to, thank you for a good presentation. It was very well put. I'm just adding a few elements to it, is that hasn't been put up here, is some of the stuff that was brought up by Commissioner Steele in the past too, is about, yes, this is a project and we're talking about it here, but Scott Dam also with Lake Pillsbury and other things has been an issue that he's represented the constituency up there on as well. And he's talked about it not just from the side of recreation on Pillsbury, but water storage, groundwater retention, everything is a part of that.
Thanks for mentioning that, James. I've also spoke with some folks from Lake Pillsbury that have some interest in this project as well, and everything that's been reported. So I'm actually fairly new. I just started, so I'm getting up to par on a lot of this information, and I'll be able to be more actively involved with you all. So.
Thank you very much. Commissioner?
Yes, and one other point, I just saw this that I made a note on, talking about declining power generation. And I think we're all aware, at least everyone I know that's in this room, that there was a 50% cut at the end of the last relicensing in any water to be diverted. So absolutely, power generation has gone down.
Thank you. Really appreciate hearing from everybody. It just gives you a fuller picture of what we are dealing with. And it is absolutely clear that this water is very important also in the Potter Valley area. Is there any comment from the public on this item? Come forward, please.
My name is George Cinquini. I live in Santa Rosa, and I have a question for Mr. Tucker. You indicated there was 200 or 300 miles of habitat above Lake Pillsbury. Did you mean 200 or 300 square miles of habitat?
Those are river miles.
And where did you get that figure?
I can give you the reference, but it's from a publication from a group out of Humboldt State.
Okay. Well, I believe that number in that publication was 150 miles. And I also believe there's other publications that were more like 37 miles or 40 miles above Lake Pillsbury. So I really have a problem with that figure.
I would note that there is differentiation between steelhead and salmonids, but I'll be happy to share the publication with you.
Okay. The other thing is that you said that the releases from Lake Pillsbury in the recent 5 years or since the relicensing update simulates the natural flow. So what we're saying is that the lower eel from Van Arsdale down has had natural flows the last several years. And shouldn't that suffice for the fish?
So the impacts of the dams aren't really one that changes flow patterns, but it is one that changes water temperatures, fish migration to the upper basin, and sediment transport to the system, all of which affects.
Well, that's true, but in talking to the biologists, they've been heavily trying to.
Excuse me, sir, I just want to bring a little bit of order here. It's totally fine. I really appreciate the exchange of information, but in this process, you address the commission with your questions, and then I will ask Dr. Tucker to answer those, and I know he'll be taking notes.
Okay, I apologize.
No problem. Any other questions, or?
No, it's just that the biologists are dealing with the temperature release of water as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And after public comment, I'll ask Craig to keep going on that. And just as a reminder also for people who may not be familiar with our process here, we do have a timer, and it's for 3 minutes. The orange one will tell you you've got 30 seconds to go. So, welcome.
Greetings. My name is Stephanie Tidwell. I am the Executive Director of Friends of the Eel River, and I really just wanted to underscore that we're truly uncharted waters here. PG&E has taken us on a roller coaster ride in terms of what the future of the Potter Valley project might be. And throughout it all, the consistent thing has been that, the two-basin solution advocated for, facilitated by Jared Huffman, has provided an opportunity for people to come to the table and negotiate. And throughout that process, Eel River advocates have been really coming to the table to try to figure out how we can make this work. And what we have seen is that PG&E's refusal to address the significant safety problems, the fish passage issues, has really kind of enabled the Russian River side to kind of, insist on a status quo situation. And that has changed now. And it's time for us to all hit the reset button, look at what is possible, and get realistic about the fact that these dams have significant ecological and safety issues. We think that, as Mr. Tucker said, there could possibly be a solution that would bring us a free-flowing Eel River back and still provide necessary winter water to the Russian River. But we need to get more serious about having some open and honest discussions about what that looks like. And I encourage the people that have been in this fight for some of them most of their lives, if not all of their lives, and more recently within the relicensing process, to get realistic about what is actually possible here and how we go about making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Morning, Chairman Fennell and Chairwoman Fennell and Commissioners. My name is Darren Murr. I'm the North Coast Director for California Trout, and I just wanted to first thank Craig for an excellent presentation and also offer some clarification on the question the gentleman raised with regard to habitat upstream of Scott Dam. Cal Trout co-sponsored a study that was also funded by National Marine Fisheries Service, and it was a study conducted through Humboldt State University and a graduate student, Allison Cooper. And that study found that there were approximately 288 miles of steelhead habitat and about 90 miles of Chinook salmon habitat upstream of Scott Dam. It's not been put out in a publication, but we have PowerPoint materials that have been presented to the Eel River Forum. Allison's actually trying to get it published, but we're not there yet. But I just wanted to shed light on that study that we conducted. And if the gentleman's referring to the smaller amounts of habitat that have been reported in the past, those were very cursory studies conducted by PG&E, and I can provide information. I think they were reported in the biological opinion for the license amendment in 2004. But anyway, they're not necessarily on the ground studies that we're referencing, on the order of 10 to 30 miles of habitat. So I think we substantially improved on the information with our study, and I'll stop there. Thank you for having me.
Just one quick question.
Commissioner Brown?
And that was on the ground? Humboldt State did on the ground?
Yes.
Of all the tribs?
Well, not all.
Pillsbury?
We subsampled portions of the watershed and extrapolated the results of what we found. And we also paired our findings with some studies that the Native Fish Society conducted on water temperatures up in the watershed. So I think we have a much better understanding now. Certainly there can be more science added to this, but we have a good idea of what kind of habitat's available above Scott Dam.
So the report is not published yet or just was shared?
That's
Because I remember it a few years ago. I think it was brought forth to the
Yeah, we finished
commission.
that in 2016, and it's available, and we can circulate the results of that if you like.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
So Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau, and this is sort of related to a couple of, I think, agenda items, but since it was brought up, I was wondering if possible, either at the May agenda or the following meeting, we can maybe work with the Congressman's office to have an agendized item for sort of an update on the timeframes of what's happening within the ad hoc, just because not all of us were brought to the table. And so it'd be interesting just to get a time frame in terms of when that report is being proposed to be brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. That brings up a good point. I actually did put out an invitation for a presentation from the Congressman's office, and I will relate your request to them as well. I think John was here earlier. I don't know. Oh, he's still here. So John heard that. Thank you. And I'll go back to, or any other public comment?
My name is Kyle Farmer. I'm from Potter Valley, and it was just so great to see the way that just in the little time that I've lived in this county, how much this conversation has evolved. I mean, the fact that we're really talking about that it's about flows, that it's about timing, that we're not talking about stealing water, because it isn't about the water, and it takes people a while to kind of get that nuance. But once we're there and once we're at that more nuanced point, that's when the really interesting conversations can happen. And what's kind of frustrating, right, is that there was going to be a really cool ground truthing study on that coming out that some people in Mendocino County were doing when they're up in the Eel River with their wetsuits on and really kind of figuring that out. And I don't know. I know that the representative from PG&E said that at some point we're going to be able to try to see some of that data. But what's hard about this process, right, is we kind of want to know that. We kind of want to know what happened during that study. And so how do we make sure that we can slow this process down enough that we can really do it right? Because, you know, a lot of the stuff in this report, you know, as you guys kind of added on to it, this is something that we can add on to and really have a fact-based, science-based conversation around. So that was just exciting to hear, so thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Dr. Nelson?
My name's Denver Nelson. I live in Eureka. I've been interested in this project for many years. I have a couple points. One is I'm a retired physician, and I would add to Dr. Tucker's presentation that I think that there's a good analogy with the Scott Dam and Lake Pillsbury as being like a giant abscess full of squawfish. Sorry, politically incorrect. Scratch that. Pike minnows, yes. I've been around so long that you could say squaw. Anyway, if you don't eliminate the pike minnow from that reservoir, it's just like an abscess. You can treat the pike minnow down in all of the tributaries of the eel, but they won't go away because there's huge ones up there that have taken over that whole system, really. So I always thought you could just drain Lake Pillsbury down to nothing, and that would kill all those big ones up there and fill it back up if you don't want to take out the dam. But if you don't deal with that, all this other is not going to work. The second point is I've been giving presentations, maybe not quite this quality, but I gave a really high quality one day, and my conclusion was that this project is not economically viable because you can't generate enough electricity to pay for the scientific studies and all the other things. And I thought it was really a great presentation. Afterwards, somebody came up to me who I don't know, still don't know. He said, that was really a brilliant presentation. He says, but you're dumb as a post. Don't you understand that PG&E doesn't care if it makes money? They just pass the cost of all of this on to us, being the ratepayers. So I guess I would have a question, is that still true? Can PG&E still pass the cost of this, or whoever takes over the project, pass it on to the ratepayers? And
30 seconds.
That's enough. Thank you.
Thank you. You could have gone all the way to the red, but thank you very much. Any further public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any further discussion? I really appreciate all that we've heard so far from public comment, and I do echo what the gentleman from Potter Valley said. As you know, as we've gone through this, we're really getting to a point of understanding what needs to happen here. It's sobering, but it's also exciting to have all this information in front of us. So, and again, as PG&E said, hopefully everything they've done so far in terms of the studies will be available. I'm not sure through what process, but they should and must be available. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. And we'll, as I said, PG&E has offered that both their power generation person and their fisheries study person will be at the next meeting, so we'll be able to talk about that quite a bit, I think, there. Dr. Tucker, did you have any further comments on the questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Brown.
And actually, it's not of the doctor or Mr. Seaman. It's just to make a comment, and I'm not sure what Allison meant about the studies. I think she was referring to the ongoing studies that are required as a part of the relicensing that just concluded in 2005 or 7, I can't remember which year, but not the ones that they had started doing for the pre-application process leading up to 2022 is the way I understand it. So I'm not sure if she wants to clarify that or not.
Yeah, actually I thought differently, but Allison maybe can help us.
Thank you. It was my intention to say that the studies conducted for this latest relicensing effort will be made available. I finally received a response after I sat down, and that we are looking to tie those up and present them in the next couple of months.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's what was my, thank you very much for clarifying that again, Allison. So, Greg.
I think the only thing I would add is, we're a long ways from removing dams or doing anything like that. I think there's a lot of homework yet to be done. It's one reason why it's disappointing that the licensing process has stopped due to the orphaning by PG&E. We'll have to make a very compelling argument and a very compelling case to stakeholders and taxpayers. If we want to remove these dams, we have to demonstrate that it's safe to remove them, that we know what will happen to the sediments that are stacked behind these structures, and we have reasonable expectations for how fish populations will respond. And so we still have a lot of homework to do and information gathering to do, but I think what we know now, that sort of the back of the napkin level analysis suggests that there's a real possibility that we could meet the goals of this two-basin solution by removing part or all of the structures. But there's a lot more homework to do. And to just address Dr. Nelson, power companies can pass on costs to ratepayers, but the Public Utility Commission does have to sign off on it. So we do have a government agency, the Public Utility Commission, that judges whether or not the operation of any given power project is in the best interest of ratepayers. And so there's a process there, and if we feel like PG&E is somehow gaming things to pass costs on the ratepayers in a manner that's uneconomical, we have the right to make that case in front of the Public Utility Commission, so you can deny their going forward and getting a new license.
Commissioner Brown.
And one final comment too, the biop on the Russian River with listed fish is also dependent on flows from Lake Mendocino. And by going by what is required, that has to be looked at as well. It's just, it's both sides of the watershed and listed aquatic species.
Well put.
One question came up for me, for as long as I can remember, regarding the discussion about the pike minnows. We've seen it as a predator that we couldn't figure out how to deal with, shoot it, have squawfish derbies, all those things. But has anybody ever studied what it might have been if they hadn't been introduced? I mean, what role have they played in this whole thing?
So, I'm a new expert on pike minnow after attending one workshop that Cal Trout put on yesterday. But I would ask Darren and some of and Pat Higgins. I think they've done a lot more thinking about eradication methods, and there's everything from bounty fisheries to get people to fish for these things. The idea of having a spear fishery, you could actually snorkel and spear these things. There's actually a proposal to introduce a strain of fish where the females only make more females, and so you slowly extirpate the population through this breeding program. So I think there's a lot of concepts on the table that are going to have to be more fully explored. But I don't think right now at this moment anyone has a magic silver bullet to solve the pike minnow problem.
Well, thank you for a very good presentation and a discussion. That will bring us to item number G, which is a presentation from Tim Nelson. He's the Natural Resources Director with the Wiyot tribe, and he'll give us an update on the tribe's position in the Potter Valley. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Tim Nelson. I'm the Natural Resources Director for the Wiyot tribe. I want to thank you all for inviting us to get the Wiyot perspective on the future of the Potter Valley project. Chairman Hernandez could not be here, unfortunately, today, but he wanted me to extend the welcome to all you here and welcome you to Wiyot country. The tribe has not wavered on their stance regarding the Potter Valley project since basically project initiation and more recently the relicensing discussions began. The tribe has stated on many occasions that in order to restore balance to the river, all infrastructure related to this project, including both dams, Scott Dam and Cape Horn Dam, that impede fish passage to vital rearing and spawning grounds in the upper watershed, and continually degrade water quality, and a water diversion point at Van Arsdale Reservoir that diverts ancestral waters out of the Eel River must be removed. Chairman Hernandez and at times other Wiyot tribal citizens have stated with this commission and others the importance of the Eel River to the tribe. To echo some of these statements, the river supports the diverse ceremonial, medicinal, practical, and subsistence resources that the Wiyot people depend on. Wiyot, which is the Wiyot word for the Eel River, plays a vital part in the tribe's cultural identity during ceremonies such as the coming of age ceremony. Wiyot holds strong medicine for all the tribe's ceremonies as the waters of Mother Earth act as blood that run through our veins. Impacts of the health of the Wiyot in the past century have been severe enough that fish populations important to the tribe, such as Valuk, which means salmon, Schwal, steelhead, bomb, green sturgeon, and Gudao lamprey, have been steadily declining. Dams and supporting infrastructure associated with this project restrict and divert natural riverine flows, prohibit anadromous fish access partially and completely to vital spawning and rearing grounds, and limit in-stream flows, leading to degraded water quality. Additionally, the introduction of invasive species like the Sacramento pike minnow into Lake Pillsbury, created as a result of this project, negatively influence native fish populations by predating on juvenile salmonids and lamprey and increasing interspecific competition for limited resources. The Tribal Council recently passed resolution number 19-02 that outlines the importance of the Eel River to the tribe and outlines the tribe's current and future position of the project. I won't read the resolution in its entirety, but I will highlight some aspects of the resolution. So Resolution 1902, approved February 25th, 2019, support for decommissioning and full removal of the Potter Valley project. The Wiyot people have always lived around Humboldt Bay and the lower Eel and Mad rivers and have used the waters of the bay, rivers, and coast for many purposes. And fishing, hunting, and gathering food and culturally significant materials are particularly important to tribal members who have long depended on fish and wildlife for subsistence. And food resources such as gudao, lamprey, valuk, salmon, bomb, sturgeon, shellfish, crabs, seals, and otter were often harvested from the rivers, bays, and mudflats, and many continue to be, in the present era, a main staple of the Wiyot diet. And the Wiyot tribe shares its name with its ancestral river, Wiyot, which translates as abundance. And the Wiyot tribe is federally recognized Native American tribe, eligible for all rights and privileges afforded to recognized tribes. And the Wiyot tribe has not willingly forfeited or entered into any agreement to surrender any inherent rights, including, but not limited to, water, fishing, and hunting rights. And the Wiyot tribe seeks to protect and preserve traditionally important resources and restore the ecological balance of the Eel River. So the Wiyot tribe believes that decommissioning and full removal of the Potter Valley project will be the most beneficial result to protecting tribal resources, including, but not limited to, water quality, habitat, and native fish populations, including salmonids and Pacific lamprey. The Wiyot tribe also believes the restoration of Eel River fish populations will best be achieved through the complete removal of Scott Dam, which will allow access to historical spawning and rearing habitats above the structure in the Eel River watershed. The Wiyot tribe also believes that the aging infrastructure coupled with geological instability and nearby seismic faults warrant the full removal of Scott Dam to avoid a potential catastrophe. The Wiyot tribe also believes the creation of Cape Horn Dam was established in order to create Van Arsdale Reservoir, the originating point for the diversion of Eel River water into the Russian River watershed at Potter Valley, and therefore should be removed in addition to Scott Dam in order to completely restore the health of the Eel River. The Wiyot tribe will actively participate in the hydropower relicensing process through FERC, Congressman Sheriff Huffman's Potter Valley Project Ad Hoc Committee, and discussions considering a two-basin solution in order to advocate for tribal rights and protection of tribal resources, while not officially supporting any proposed solutions until all concerns are addressed to the satisfaction of the Tribal Council. So it goes without saying that the tribe will not stand for the status quo for maintaining the aging infrastructure of the Potter Valley Project. It is our view that long-term success will best be achieved through other measures that promote increased water management within both the Eel and Russian River watersheds. Upgraded irrigation methods, promotion of water conservation, floodplain restoration, construction of pipes in lieu of open irrigation ditches, and many others are all measures that this commission and other entities need to give more considerable thought to rather than looking to the status quo of maintaining this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Brown.
Yes, sir. Sir?
Tim?
What were the rivers, you stated 3 rivers that you have a dependency on, the tribe does? And
So
which
the
rivers?
ancestral territory of the Wiyot encompasses all the way from the Van Duzen all the way up to Little River, north over to the first mountain of the 299. So that is Mad River, Humboldt Bay, and the Eel River.
Okay. On the Mad River, what is the Wiyot tribe's position with Williams Dam and Ruth Lake?
We have not officially taken any official stance on that.
Okay.
Though I am sure that we would probably pose it.
Can you stay there a minute, Tim? Commissioner Gore?
I was just saying, has the, one of the things that we've been doing is having a lot of outreach from the tribes on the Russian River side. And I was just wondering if, to your knowledge, if there's any coordination or conversations going on between Wiyot, Round Valley, and, I mean, in my area, we have Dry Creek Pomo very engaged in it. We have Cloverdale Rancheria Pomo. We have Kashaya very engaged at this point and trying to get more engaged in it. And I was just wondering if there was any, from your knowledge, whether, not looking for an assessment of good or bad, but any coordination in that respect. Or even, I would say, this is kind of a question as much for this with, you're the chair of the Robinson Rancheria.
Yes.
Any tribal coordination, or are these, this is my ignorance showing, or is it not that organized in that way, not for any qualitative reason? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, to answer that.
Because they're all sovereign nations. It's not like everybody gets together and has a conversation. It's kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for each individual tribe, but I can just say what we've participated in as far as the collaboration amongst other tribes. We've collaborated a lot with Round Valley. Doug's here, more than we would the Russian tribes, Russian River tribes. But we are actually engaged through another, I I guess, outlet that has to do with shared common goals with water management with the Russian River folks. They definitely have heard our concerns, and yeah, like I said, I don't want to speak for each tribe, but they've definitely they understand our concerns.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Right.
Commissioner, did you?
No, he answered pretty much what I was going to ask next, is what tribes he's reached out to, aside from, he said Round Valley, so.
Round Valley, Sherwood, Dry Creek, Chris out there, Javier from, I believe, Sherwood. I believe we've worked with Robinson Rancheria, and yeah, those are the ones just coming to mind right now.
Thank you, Tim. I'll open it up for public comment on this item. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, thank you again very much, Tim. And as I indicated, we have another presentation now from the Round Valley Indian Tribe. And I welcome Doug Hutt, who I believe is the treasurer. I'm not sure what title you have, but I know I've seen you around a lot, Doug.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The rest
H-U-T-T.
Yeah, I'm here to read a statement by Round Valley. It's a copy of a resolution adopted in 2009, and that's our tribe's stance, and that's pretty much what our tribal council's been going by since. We've had 3 or 4 tribal councils change hands since then, but all of them have gone by this base document. So, like Tim's, it's pretty lengthy and has a lot of government speak in there. I'll read you the opening and the closing so you'll get the idea of the document. I'm leaving a copy with your commission so each of you will have it. Resolution RV 2009-067, a resolution adopted by Round Valley Tribal Council, governing body for the Round Valley Indian Tribes, declaring the tribe's intent to protect, enhance, and restore the natural vitality and health of the Eel River and its tributaries. Skipping through, Round Valley rejects and withdraws the proposal to settle the conflict over Potter Valley project diversions of the Eel River water to the Russian River Basin. The tribes reject the proposal and any proposals in their entirety. Be it further resolved, Round Valley Tribes opposes any discharge or diversion of any water from the Eel into the Russian River Basin effective immediately, and Round Valley Indian Tribes shall oppose any diversions from the natural watershed at any point in perpetuity. So that's basically our tribe stance. Like Mr. Nelson and the WIOTs and many of the other agencies represented here, we're involved in the ad hoc process and a number of other processes involving FERC as well. And Round Valley Tribal Council is interested in listening to the idea of a two-basin solution, but like the other tribes on the Eel, we need to see actual empirical data scientifically that shows that these are possible. And to date, there really hasn't been any data generated showing that. There's been a lot of work in that process, but like the others here have stated today, the closure and changing of the FERC process, the funding with the study monies, even the studies that have been already processed and that will be forthcoming by PG&E really aren't enough to answer any of these questions. There's a lacking of...
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hutt, I'm well aware that Lake, Mendocino, and Sonoma County have a POMO guiding council. I am not sure.
POMO Nations Commission?
Correct. And has this been discussed at that level with the POMO tribes?
Round Valley has representatives, and they sit on that commission. We've engaged some of the POMO tribes directly, but for the most part, we're engaging the Eel River tribes because it's the Eel River that we reside on, and that's our primary concern and where the water goes from there. Also, as has been established, previous court precedents, those would be the tribes who would have reserved water rights, would only be the tribes that occupy the Eel, so those are the tribes that we've been engaging.
So the Potter Valley tribe is also on the Eel? Yes, they are. Okay, well, I'll respectfully disagree.
The Eel does not flow through the Potter Valley, ma'am.
Well, it does over the hills, sir. And that's where the Pomo Potter Valley tribe has land, right around Cape Horn.
Yes, ma'am.
So, you know, I'm just trying to get a handle on...
We engage with the Potter Valley tribe pretty much on a monthly basis.
Okay, so what is their position?
They support Round Valley's position.
Oh, okay. Because I think we have a letter from them in Mendocino County, so that's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I had a question.
Yes, please, Commissioner.
So this was brought to the United Pomo Nations Council. Is that the group you're talking about, or is this a different committee that you're talking about?
The Pomo Nations group, it was brought to them, the FERC process, when it began at 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Any further comment or?
Yeah, and I think Michael Hunter chairs that group,
Yes, that's the same group.
so we could go get the paperwork.
Yes.
I see a need at our next meeting in Mendocino to expand that part of the conversation. Yeah, good, great. Any further comment or questions from commissioners? Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Any public input on this item? Seeing none, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, Doug. And you said you had copies of the solution. Can you hand it to the clerk here, please? Thank you very much.
Very much, Board.
And now that will bring us to the inland, speaking of Potter Valley, the Inland Water and Power Project. Janet Pauley, PhD, Chair of the Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission, will give us an update on the FERC orphan project for the Potter Valley project. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you, Estelle. And I'd like to thank you for the invitation to speak today on behalf of Inland Water and Power Commission's involvement.
Can you just go a little bit closer to the mic?
Like there?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
We're a joint powers authority whose member agencies are the County of Mendocino Water Agency, the City of Ukiah, Potter Valley Irrigation District, Redwood Valley County Water District, and the Russian River Flood Control. We've been involved with the Potter Valley project for a very long time. More recently in this relicensing process with PG&E and FERC. As you know, IWPC had prepared an indicative proposal during the auction process to purchase the project. On January 25th, that ended when PG&E withdrew their notice of intent to relicense. Now we're moving forward in the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and like Allison, I probably didn't need to say that again, but FERC orphan project process, which is a completely different path. We already were, but we are continuing to build a broad-based coalition of those who are concerned with the future of the project. I would characterize that effort as moving down this new path with the belief that it will result in a true two-basin solution. As Dr. Tucker said so well, this is going to take time. The problem that we have, however, is a lack of time. Our immediate goal, therefore, is to meet the July 1st FERC deadline and submit a notice of intent and a pre-application document to relicense. Just to reemphasize, short time frame, lots of work to do. I really don't have any more information to give the group today, but I hope to give an update at your May meeting, and I'm happy to attempt to answer questions.
Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Gore.
I'll just say, I appreciate all the work that Inland Water and Power Commission, IWPC as you call it, has done on this. This has come up a couple times at the Eel Russian River Commission Forum. I think there was a lot of questions when we had the meeting in Lake County from some people about like, oh, what was this, who hadn't been involved previously. There was questions that came up. I want to remind everybody, even some people who had asked about membership. Well, could I join? Could I do not? It's an existing joint powers authority, legally created, all these other things. From the side of Sonoma County, there's nothing to report except that we're having collaborative dialogue with IWPC and other groups, fisheries related and others, with the hope to be involved in a two-basin solution proposal and effort going forward, whatever that means. I think I want to go back to kind of the beginning of the presentation here and say that the two-basin solution really kind of, if you think about it, a lot of people are talking about status quo, but as Carrie kind of points out, well, there was a 50+% reduction in overall usage coming off. There has, through the ad hoc, been the determination of the flows being, in the last presentation, similar to natural flows. The one key kind of indicator that everybody keeps looking is fisheries and fish passage and how we support that. And I think we all support that, restoration and passage and other things. So, in the conceptual side, I just would like to say, formally, we've all passed these resolutions as different counties. We've all said it, and it's a pleasure to have the supervisor here, Supervisor Crandall, because one of the things that is interesting when you see a two-basin solution is you're probably saying, what about my basin, right? What about my area? And that's really where, Supervisor Steele was very involved here, just by way of background, of making sure that people remembered that there was constituency, there was management, there was resources, there was other things that were up in that area. And I think, this has been a forum to discuss ideas and to get public input on what's going on. It's never really materialized in this formal meeting into a place where we ratchet out plans and other things. And we thought about that for a while. I think we were here at one point. As way of background, the difficulty of that is that this is really an entity without staff and without resources. So whoever's the chair kind of has to, gets the glory of setting the agenda, but at the same time has to try to pull together the resources and get a couple $1,000 from each county to help fund the admin. And then, one of the things, there was actually in this meeting, probably a year ago, there was, because we were just in the commission saying, well, what's the role of the Eel Russian River Commission in this whole process? Is it just a forum, or should we be involved in the FERC process formally? And I know we'll get to this a little bit with the letter and some of the concerns I have with that in this commission, but because on the other side, it's been, well, we don't have the capacity, the JPA isn't made up to do this. Structurally, it's not the right way to do it. To be able to make changes to the JPA, we'd have to take this stuff back from our forum here and get approval from majority of every single one of our boards. And then we were looking at, and I think rightfully so, is how do we get tribal membership and others, and, it comes to this thing in government, is it worth it to invest in the vehicle that you have before you, or is it worth it to invest in something that's apropos? So there was an assertion at one point that this entity should not even exist, that it didn't have the legal authority to be able to be involved in the presentation. We kind of looked at that. I think cursory. I mean, we're not. Once again, we don't have staff time that are diving into all these issues. Then there's been. I have to be honest. There's been like a heaping mound of things like. PRA requests that we had to determine how do we do those with our different areas. And I think we've come to a place where I would just like to say, at least I know what I'm doing when I'm coming here. No matter what we decide is the future of this commission, at least I know, like every time I sit here, as I hear different points of view that are not from my watershed. And my only thing is to try and make sure my watershed folks come so that they can also share with you what we're dealing with. Because obviously 100+ years of this system means we've all grown up dependent upon it. And so, you don't unravel that in a heartbeat. So, this is kind of a weird thing because I just want to reference that there's a time on July 1st where there's an application due for something, right, for anybody who permits. But then there's a long, drawn-out process, expensive, $1 million studies, and I don't say $1 million lightly, maybe 8 to 10 million, maybe plus. PG&E used to say it was going to be 20 plus for them to do the studies, to go through a FERC process, to even further study studies that were previously studied, and identify if things like fish passage could work with a series of different scenarios. I hope that's, I'm not going too far, but I just want to make sure that we're operating from a similar place and where it is. And I hope you don't mind me looking at you as, to kind of give you some of my thoughts, but I want you to, there's a lot of stuff getting thrown at all of us at different times, and kind of it's, we very rarely take votes to even formalize positions on things because we use this as a forum, but we can. And so with that being said, I'll shut down and say, I've appreciated just the fact that everyone talks about what's going on and looks around, but those from Mendocino County have stepped up by even preparing an indicative proposal and going into PG&E, and we'll see if we end up partner together, or if others partner together, or if there's a variety of people who do on something that's bigger and better. Is that put?
Thank you. And I will reiterate one thing. While Inland Water and Power Commission did step up during the auction process, I don't believe we ever intended to do it alone without building this coalition, which I think is critically important for the reasons that I've already mentioned. And we welcome conversations with any group that's willing to have an open, interest-based discussion with all the options on the table at the beginning, because this is going to take a long time to put together what I envision to be, actually could be an amazing process with a conclusion that would be unique. We have the opportunity to do that. We need to take that opportunity.
So, Janet, I had a couple of questions for you. First of all, can you clarify, so the name of your organization is the Inland Water and Power Project. So that is partly why you can make an application to FERC, because this is, at this stage, under the Federal Energy Relicensing, is a power project. So what part of your proposal, is that central to your proposal, is the power?
No, as mentioned earlier today, the power is not central for anyone actually involved in this process. I can't think that they would honestly suggest that. The water supply on our side, the two main issues here are restoration and water supply reliability. Yeah. And those are the issues that we have to address, and we are working on addressing right now. Water supply, obviously, on our side is of critical importance. Yeah. No, hydropower production, no. But at this point in time, the FERC license is there because of hydropower production.
That's right.
So that's what we're dealing with. That's the time frame we have to work in right now, and we intend to do that. After a certain point in time, we'll see how it changes. Okay. And it will change with time. Well, I had another question, but I forgot, but maybe I'll think of it and I'll ask you later. But I do really appreciate you giving us an update on that. Oh, yeah, this is my question. So you said it's different now. So it's as opposed to going to PG&E, we're not.
A lot of that was proprietary, very under strict confidentiality regulations. Confidentiality regulations. Is it the same situation with FERC, or is there a little bit more daylight so that we might know if anybody else is applying, for instance?
You will know once anyone files a notice of intent to relicense it. That is public knowledge. That document will be distributed by FERC for the project P77. It's no longer under a non-disclosure agreement. We will all know who is at the table shortly after July 1st.
Great. Thank you so much. Any public comment on this item? Yeah, we got somebody. You can have a seat there.
Hi, Stephanie Tidwell from Friends of the Eel River again. And while I'd like to say that I'm encouraged to hear Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission using the words two-basin solution, I have to say that the history thus far makes me very skeptical on whether we have similar definitions of what a two-basin solution is. So I guess my question is, whether this acknowledges the overwhelming body of evidence about the fact that Scott Dam has problems that are beyond our economic scope to fix and it needs to come down, and whether this is, if it's going to be a two-basin solution, something that will be presented to the Huffman ad hoc group. If I hear that there's a collaboration going on, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of any Eel River advocates that have been invited into that collaboration. So I think that what I'm saying here is I would like to have hope that we might be able to all be at the table negotiating, but until I see what that definition of two-basin solution looks like and whether it acknowledges some undeniable facts about the massive problems with these dams, we remain skeptical.
Thank you. Janet, you can just press that there and you'll get, yeah.
If it's green, it's on, right? There you go. As I said before, we are more than willing to have conversations with anyone that wishes to come to the table in an open, interest-based conversation process with everything on the table to start, and this is going to take time. I'm really encouraged with some of the discussions we're having right now. So if you would like to engage, we will have a conversation with you.
Do you have regular meetings that people could be aware of?
We have meetings constantly right now.
I imagine you do.
We have
but I mean, like a regular posted meeting.
We have our public meeting, our Inland Water and Power Commission meeting is the second Thursday of every month.
Second Thursday of every month?
That's a public meeting, yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Any further comments? Okay. Thank you again, Janet. Really appreciate that presentation. And that will bring us to CalTrout. Darren Moreau, who's the North Coast Director, Reggie Collins, Staff Attorney, and Curtis Knight, Executive Director. I'm not sure who's going to be. I think it's Darren. Update on CalTrout's efforts towards attaining a two-basin solution in the Potter Valley project.
Yes, is this on? Okay, thank you.
You can bring it up.
Thank you again for having me, Chairwoman Fennell and Commissioners. My name is Darren Maru. I'm the North Coast Director for California Trout. My Director, Curtis Knight, and Staff Attorney, Reggie Collins, aren't here today, so I'll be presenting on behalf of our team. I wanted to update you, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. I wanted to update you on two areas of activity that CalTrout's been involved in. The first is some of the technical studies that we're either associated with or sponsoring, and then the second is our intent within the FERC process to submit a notice of intent and a pre-application document. With regard to the technical studies, just to recap, beginning around 2015 and 2016, partly through our involvement with the Eel River Forum, we began to develop some estimates of unimpaired flows so we could have a better understanding of the water supply related to the upper Eel River Basin. And we commissioned a hydrologist to help us with some feasibility modeling to look at some of the ways in which the reasonable and prudent alternative flow releases could be made to benefit fisheries downstream of Van Arsdale, primarily involving the block water releases. Those studies and information are available on our Eel River Forum website if people want to access that. And as I mentioned before when I came to the mic here, we helped facilitate the study of habitat availability for salmon and steelhead in the upper Eel River Basin through our colleagues at Humboldt State University and funded by the National Marine Fisheries Service and CalTrout. And I'll, if you can instruct me on ways to make that available to your commission, be happy to do that. It's also available on our Eel River Forum website, but easily circulated information on that study. More recently, we've been engaged in contributing to funding for the ad hoc committee, and I want to echo Craig's comments regarding the leadership that Congressman Huffman has been providing and his staff here, John Driscoll, locally, in facilitating these discussions. This is a very robust discussion going on today, and we've been having these also within the ad hoc committee, and I think it's just really good to hear different voices right now. Things are moving so quickly, but continuing to talk about these issues is very important. So over the past 12 months, CalTrout has been working with a local firm, McBain Associates, to commission a couple different studies related to dam decommissioning. And our intent here is to bring forward some pre-feasibility cost estimates and understanding of what it would take to decommission Scott Dam and Van Arsdale Cape Horn Dam. The first one, we hired a Santa Rosa-based engineering firm, Parsons Engineering, and we worked with their tunnel enlargement or their tunnel engineering specialist, a man named John Kaneshiro, to do two things. We wanted to estimate what it would take to enlarge the capacity of the tunnel that connects Van Arsdale to the Russian River side, and we also wanted to look at alternative water diversion infrastructure that could enable the removal of Cape Horn Dam, but continued run-of-the-river diversion. And the reason a year ago, when the whole landscape here was quite different, for looking at tunnel enlargement was because we weren't certain that a run-of-the-river diversion in the wintertime would enable Lake Mendocino to remain viable, in other words, not go dry. The Sonoma Water staff had provided us information from their studies previously that indicated that without the Russian or the Eel River water supply, Lake Mendocino would go dry in, I think it's 40% of the water years. And so for us to propose a two-basin solution and continue a run-of-the-river diversion, we weren't certain whether or not the existing tunnel capacity of up to 300 CFS would be adequate to meet the needs on the Russian River side. And so we began exploring enlarging that tunnel capacity. The Parsons Engineering folks looked at two alternatives. One was enlargement of the existing tunnel, and the other was boring a new tunnel adjacent to the existing tunnel. And just in brief, and I can provide some of the information that's come out of those studies as well. We don't have reports on them. Our funding has enabled us to present this information in PowerPoint format, so we can provide those, and I think I've circulated them around to some of our groups internally, so they're out there already. But just in brief, enlarging the existing tunnel would require an investment of about $45 to $60 million and take several years to implement. And for drilling a new tunnel, it's slightly less expensive and has a shorter time period, but we're estimating about $35 to $40 million. And again, I just want to echo that back then we were looking at this not as a way to increase the diversion volume, but simply to maintain that diversion volume, but shift the timing from the storage to the winter run-of-the-river diversion. So that was the goal there, to better understand those alternatives. The second part of the study that Parsons helped us look at was alternative water diversion infrastructure that would allow Cape Horn Dam to be removed. And we looked at, well, three different things. We could build a riverside diversion, screen diversion, such as you might see in the Central Valley. Those are very expensive, and our estimate for that would be something in the neighborhood of $120 million. And we didn't look at that very closely. But the other two alternatives we looked at were installation of what are called rainy wells. These are towers like you see. They're being used currently on the Mad River and down on the Russian River as well. And they're essentially installed into the river bed and have subsurface pumps subsurface pumps that remove the water from the subsurface and export them out into the diversion facilities. The second alternative we looked at was what we call an infiltration gallery approach. It's very similar in that you have pipes installed in the river bed that collect water and deliver it to the diversion facilities. There are some alternatives there in terms of placement of those facilities that might allow gravity feed from the riverbed on the Eel River into the current diversion facilities and then exported into the Russian River. Again, these are all very pre-feasibility studies, so we're just getting some ideas on the table and some preliminary cost estimates of what it would take to install these different structures. And with those diversion facilities, we're targeting the current capacity that the tunnels allow, up to 300 CFS. And just briefly, the cost estimates for the rainy well approach is on the order of $25 to $40 million. And the infiltration gallery approach, our preliminary cost estimates are in the range of $15 to $30 million to install those. The infiltration gallery approach hasn't been implemented at the scale of 300 CFS that we're aware of. we're still continuing to explore some of those, but there is a system that's on the Tuolumne River, owned and operated by the Turlock Irrigation District, and they intend to make that system operational this coming summer. And so I think there are several people that will be attending and a field tour to look at those facilities. I think it's a very viable thing to look at in the future. And again, we don't have reports yet, but I can very soon get some of this information out to the public, so you'll have a better understanding of what we've been looking at. And lastly, regarding the technical studies, we've been working with a woman, an engineer with a firm called Princeton Hydrotech back in the East Coast. She's got quite a wealth of experience in dam decommissioning, engineering design. Her name is Laura Wildman. And I just heard the preliminary information that she's prepared this past Monday, and so we're not ready yet to release that to the public. We're just getting close to it, but her primary focus was, and again, I want to mention that this was building on some of the studies that Sonoma Water commissioned. I think in August of 2017, they came out with a couple of reports that looked at dam decommissioning, one by McMillan Jacobs Associates and the other by AEG. And so we had just begun our study when those came out from Sonoma Water, and so we sort of shifted our scope a little bit and tried to build on the information that was provided in those reports provided by Sonoma Water. And so we actually had the opportunity to take the investigations into the treatment of sediment that's deposited in Lake Pillsbury behind Scott Dam quite a bit further and shed new light on that. And so I think there will be a lot of interest in seeing the results of these studies that come forth. I hope within about a month we can get these out. We're sort of working with the engineer and some of the McMillan Jacobs folks as well to make sure that we're presenting that in a good light. And so I'm not going to share too much more detail about those studies until we're ready to get those out, but again, they'll be forthcoming very soon. And so I'm going to shift my attention to the current FERC relicensing process and CalTrout's activities there, and I have to confess that I'm not, this effort is being led by my director and attorney and a group of other consultants, and I'm not directly involved with this planning. I've been more focused on the technical studies, so I probably am going to give you a very shallow overview. But anyway, I think if you think to the last flow chart that Craig put up in his presentation and think about the different pathways and think about a large question mark in the middle of that graphic where we just really don't know. We're just really uncertain about which pathway is the best at this point and which might lead to a two-basin solution that we can all support. We certainly don't know the outcome of either of those pathways, and so our intent right now is to prepare a notice of intent and a pre-application document so that we have a placeholder in the FERC process that would allow discussions among parties and stakeholders that are here and allow the discussion of a settlement that I think would lead to a regional solution with our own control over that, as opposed to just putting it out there for FERC to weigh in on and resolve. So with preparation of the notice of intent and pre-application document, we're working with a couple different firms. One is Natel Energy. They're a California-based firm that specializes in small hydropower, and so we believe with the two-basin solution and the right entity, we could potentially maintain power generation from the diversion. Again, this would be a wintertime diversion, but there would be potentially some power generation available from the project. And we're working with another company called Natural Systems Design, and we're hoping that they can help us. They're not funded yet, but we're hoping they can help us explore alternative water supply, water storage opportunities that would enable water to continue to be delivered to the Potter Valley itself. And they've got a couple ideas that we're exploring right now, and we're sort of on the forefront of trying to launch those to really look at solutions for water storage on the Russian River side that would enable what we hope to be our partners in this to continue to be viable in the Potter Valley. We have taken the invitation of the Inland Water and Power Commission and the Potter Valley Irrigation District and engaged in discussions with them And we continue to engage with Sonoma Water, and we continue to engage with the Round Valley Indian Tribe, and we hope to engage with this commission as well, and really seek a common solution where all of us can get behind a project, a solution to where we're at now, that would avoid lengthy and protracted, uncertain outcomes, that can get us to a two-basin solution that we can all support. And I think with that, I'll stop. Take any questions if you have any.
Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Boer?
I haven't spent a lot of time with you or with, I've met Curtis and others, but I just want to thank you guys for really getting into the details of this and not pursuing what is the frame of what it was in the past. I mean, for me, that's where I've tried to come to the table as somebody who, when I got elected 4.5 years ago to be a supervisor, is the history of the Potter Valley project versus the future are two very different things. And a lot of the history is mired in perceived or real, depending on where you stand, antagonism and vitriol. Let's be very real. But if we can get to the point, like we've seen with the ad hoc, like we've seen with the studies being conducted, like we've seen with even this commission, where we can openly agree, disagree, state our interests, ruffle each other's feathers, come back, say who's at the table, who's not at the table. Ultimately, that's where it needs to be. And from, you know, for somebody who's from the side of the tunnel that receives a benefit from the Eel River, I acknowledge that that's an important resource. I appreciate that you also acknowledge that our community grew up on that, and that as somebody who's also a champion for Russian River health, for swim, fish, and drink, you know, all areas of the Clean Water Act, and a huge champion for that, it's figuring out the where we go that is really important here. And that's what I just want you to take that back today, and whatever we ultimately figure out, whether through this commission or through other means we sit at the table, is just as much as Janet Polly, I think, put is, you know, we got about, whether we or somebody else is involved in putting in an application to enter into the FERC process, we have about $8 to $10 million of things to study. Right? And the difficulty is to enter into a discussion about what we want to explore. It almost assumes that you have to have a preconceived notion of what that means, right? Like, oh, and once again, everybody has an opinion, whether that's the future of Scott Dam, whether it's how we achieve fisheries passage, right? Whether it's what is the resilience models and the conservation models on the other side of the tunnel. And then once again, to the other thing, which is that this is not just about one project, because all of these things are interconnected. The water coming out of Lake Mendocino, as Carrie and I know, and Janet and I had talked about recently, is silted mud. And so you have farmers all the way down the entire Russian River who are regulated under the Clean Water Act, right, for sediment loading, and we have a control structure that dumps all of that out, which then brings into the other conversation of what do we do, how do we get a control structure, how do we get this in the right way, how do we set that up, how do we over on this side of the tunnel set up the right kind of, or this and other side, the right kind of structures that still deal with that, and how do we also come to the table and improve our resiliency, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying it's nice to have this. So I have to just put that out there. And thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate all sides of this. One question that has been posed to me over and over, Darren, so don't want to put you in the spot, but I'm going to anyway, which is basically, do they have the money for this? Which is the huge question for everybody in terms of how do we manage this transfer away from the PG&E Potter Valley project as public entities? There's money involved. I don't think you're thinking of buying it, but could you maybe explore a little more what you think you would add?
Well, again, I think our intent is to provide a place to have this discussion about what we want
Yeah.
the project to be once it's resolved. CalTrout certainly doesn't have an interest in owning and operating a dam or diversions facility or being involved in the future. We're just trying to facilitate these discussions now and to provide a context within the FERC process. And you know, leading up to the day in which we need to submit our pre-application document and a notice of intent, we may change. You know, if we wait till the day before it's due and start then, we won't have it ready. So our intent is to prepare what we need to enter into that process. But between now and then, you realize how quickly things have been changing in the last months and over the past year. So that may change. We're still having discussions where I think our team will be in Round Valley on April 9th to meet with the tribal council, and we certainly have to hear their opinion and their perspective. You've heard it here today. They're not necessarily at that place of supporting a two-basin solution yet. Neither are the Wiyot tribal people, so I don't know that, well, I don't think we know the outcome of those discussions yet. But I think we want to continue to work with the Potter Valley Irrigation Interests and the Inland Water and Power Commission to determine whether or not we can move together jointly in this endeavor. And as far as costs down the road to conduct studies and do the dam decommissioning, I don't think anybody knows that yet.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in any kind of proposal, there's a qualified applicant. That was one of the things that was brought up by PG&E. Is that also true of the FERC orphan project process?
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah.
FERC's going to look at our application and determine whether or not it's feasible and credible.
Mhm.
So we've got a lot of work to do to make it that way. I think if we came together as a united coalition with a solution that we want to propose, it would add a lot of credibility to what we're proposing. But
Thank
again, long road to even get to July 1, so.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this item?
I just want to say that gallery infiltration concept just kind of blew my mind. I don't know how many nights I've spent thinking about that fish screen and what like a Rube Goldberg type project that is, and how do you do it in more of like a simple, organic way, and that is really cool. But I also wanted to say, you know, he mentioned the question mark on there, and he also alluded to it, but there's also there's a ticking little sand timer up in the corner of that slide as well that we just need to come back to. But we also have to remember that there's money out there, you know. I think that if we can come together, I do think that there's money out there to figure out how to do these things, that we can live in a state that can pay for its water in a way that, you know, takes care of the environment and can do it all. I mean, we're just capable of this stuff if we value it. We're capable of anything. But that train's leaving the station, right? And it's one of those things we're gonna have to get on the train car and then keep on figuring it out together. So I don't know how FERC is gonna look at that kind of half-formed collaboration, but that's what it's gonna have to be. And some of these things are gonna have to be resolved once the train is already moving. So if anybody hasn't read a book called Getting to Yes, it makes the difference between positional and principled-based bargaining, and kind of what Janet was talking about with interest, to me, falls into that. And if it sounds like we're moving there, and I'm just so excited to hear these just really out-of-the-box ideas, because the solution is going to be something we never even thought of yet. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who stays up at night thinking about screens, fish screens. Just kidding.
So,
Up at night thinking about this fish screen.
I will say something that's come out of a lot of these conversations that we're drilling down and drilling down. Time is of the essence. So I really want us to be able to nail down our May meeting as soon as we can.
I'll make it happen.
Thank you.
I just sent some notes.
Thank you very, very, really appreciate it.
Yep.
So,
I appreciate I just was able to send a couple fireballs out into the ether and,
you're going to make it happen?
yeah, absolutely,
Oh,
for sure.
perfect.
I'm gonna do whatever you need.
Great, thank you so much. You're a can-do kind of guy.
Yeah, I'll make it happen.
24th, excellent. We
I'll just-
will,
Yes, yeah.
Mendocino on May 24th, so we'll keep you posted. And actually,
Is that Lake? Lake?
Yeah.
oh, that's Lake, sorry.
Do it in the same spot we did before? Jim had
It's
us
Lake.
at, where was it that we ended up meeting? I mean, it was a fun thing to try
was
and
the
find a
hotel.
place that was free. It was,
I actually believe that our clerk has already confirmed with your clerk that we can use the Board of Supervisors chambers. So that's on Forbes Street, 255 North Forbes Street. So great, that's wonderful, thank you so much. I did have just one other question for Darren, or we can resolve it later, but you were talking about sharing some of those studies, and I think that I would be able to offer that we can create links on the Humboldt County website, if that would be okay with you. Perfect, thank you. All right, so our next on the agenda is something that came to us from former Lake County Representative Jim Steele, and we have a letter that he had requested we think about sending to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And I trust that you've all had a chance to look at it. I know we discussed it in Lake County, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether or not we want to pursue this. Commissioner Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I think it was Sonoma County that he discussed it.
Yeah.
And you can certainly feel his passion.
Yeah.
But, you know, I really, what is FERC going to do with this? They have very set rules that's in law, and they must follow certain processes as a result of the relicensing or the orphaning or any type of process. But I could certainly feel former Supervisor Steele's passion throughout the letter. So I just don't know. I don't think that FERC will give up their power, so to speak, but I don't think that they have any choice. I mean, all their processes are hard deadlines. Although this project, I will have to say, is unique. I don't think they've ever had to deal with this type of relicensing where water is important to communities and not necessarily the power generation. So it's rather unique in their process. I will have to say I was very surprised of how they responded to PG&E pulling their pre-application and stopping the studies, as far as I know, and getting out of the process. So it's very interesting. There is a deadline, July 1, that we all need to take seriously. So I don't have anything to say one way or another. I just don't think it's going to make a difference. So what are we saying to them? We're giving them a bunch of information. That's important. But on the other hand, you know, I think they have a lot of this information and they know its value. So anyway.
That's very kind of you. Something occurs to me that, first of all, we didn't expect, at least I don't think, a fairly significant number of us who have been following this expected the orphan project to come out so quickly. That was a surprise. When PG&E first talked about the fact that they were dropping out, I got the impression that FERC could actually delay it a little bit because of how this is unfolding. So it may be that at a certain point, we're going to have to say, hey, give us a minute here to catch our breath as we're taking on something enormous like this.
And that might be a more proper letter to come from the Eel Russian River Commission.
Yeah. Commissioner Gore?
You want to say anything?
Commissioner Crandall, do you want to say anything? I mean, it's,
I mean, it came.
it
I
came
don't
from
know if you
Lake
have
County.
any
It actually came from
questions.
Steele.
Came from Steel, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say the same thing is it's not qualitative, it's just not relevant to the process at hand. It was a good discussion at the time that it came up, like, hey, what's our place, how do we do this? But as we know, this thing evolves strangely, very slow and deliberately, and then very quick and authoritatively spiking into heart attacks. And so it's not germane to now in my mind. I think what's more germane is that we went through is the discussion that we've brought forth about the resolutions from our counties about the importance of this integrated 3-county system to our people, our livelihoods, our work, and also to our natural resources and our fisheries, right? So, I mean, that's a good place for us to start from. That's all I got.
Commissioner Crandall?
Yes, well, I know Jim submitted a letter, he spoke with me about this in the past. If that's, how the commission feels, I mean, I think that's what direction we're gonna eventually go anyhow, so I mean, I know it's an action item, so I mean, if I offer it and it doesn't get support, then we just move on, right?
Yep,
So
absolutely.
I'll go ahead and offer it, the motion to send the letter of intent or.
You're not going to be
interest.
mad if I don't second it?
No.
Cool.
I know the process, I know how it works, so.
I'm joking.
So we
But
have
in our world, there's sometimes people, they don't like that, get a little squirrely. Much love. Thank you for offering it. I'm respectfully not going to second.
I can't, after what I said. And certainly Supervisor Steele, his passion comes out, and what was several months ago, it's all changed today. And I would just rather, if the Eel Russian River Commission wants to communicate with FERC, there's other processes we need to use than this huge dialogue, because they're setting their own pace. And we really don't know what that process is, and I don't think they do either. A lot of their people have retired, but I understand the staff person over this project, this licensing procedure is very good, but do not know the person. So I'm very respectful of the letter. I just feel it will cause a lot of confusion at this point in the process. But if this commission wants to submit something, maybe it is. Please list the process, because this is a bit unusual how quickly you came out when it was in a pre-application process. And we all read the FERC communication.
So maybe it would be better to do it different later down the road or something like that, and maybe I can just rescind my motion and we just work on
agree.
something different.
I think we should, I think we should send something and figure out what it is, but once again, this issue of what FERC is and what this is, it's like a plug and an outlet that don't fit to me. It doesn't fit what is currently on the table, what's being requested from us from FERC. I mean, it'd be very good for us at the appropriate time to say, hey, this is what the Eel Russian River Commission is. Here's the person at FERC that we'd want to approach that with. Here's the kind of platform that it provides. Here's our statements of our resolutions from our combined four counties or whatever that might be. But we should figure out what that is. And I think we can talk about it next round and see if we have any more insight into it. Like, once again, totally open to it, but this is not, in this sense, the authority that's being requested by FERC to respond to. And it's just, that's not anything other than what it is. So I think we come back with it, if, we discuss it.
Yeah, I like that idea. Again, lots of respect for former Commissioner Steele. He's a wealth of knowledge, been involved on a lot of different levels, and if you could just convey that to him, that we had this kind of conversation, I'll probably send him a letter too. And then I would like to make it an agenda item to discuss what, if anything, we want to send to FERC as this body and what it might look like. So we'll put that on the next agenda as well. I do think in May, we may even have a better idea of how pressing the need is to let them know that this is a huge challenge and we might want a bit of a delay. So thank you for that suggestion, Commissioner Brown. Okay, so this action item resulted in no action, and we'll go on from there.
That sounds like government right there.
There, I have to say it. So I do not see, oh, I do see.
Resulted in no action. Can you please put that in the minutes? This action item has resulted in no action. She's taking notes. So that will bring us to the Eel River Restoration Project, Citizen Science Project, an update. Pat Higgins has made his way here, and he has a PowerPoint. I will say we have another couple of items. We have an action item and an informational item to follow this. So I'm going to request that this presentation be limited to no more than 15 minutes. We're all getting hungry too.
You got it, Estelle. Good morning. I am Pat Higgins. And can you click full screen in PowerPoint on view so that we can get the, oh, I can. Sure. And then this is, okay, so this is the mouse. So we should be able to view this thing full screen in PowerPoint. There we go. And then too many variables. Thank you. I will keep it brief, Estelle. I am Pat Higgins, the Eel River Recovery Project. And if it's okay, I'll bring the new members of your commission our brochure at the end here because I'm a little off balance. I didn't know I was up next. I should have been paying more attention. We have been doing a nonprofit organization within the Eel River since 2012. And let's see. Yeah, and what I would like to report to you on is the state of the Eel River in terms of its temperature and flow, in terms of its problems with toxic cyanobacteria, and also with respect to its fall Chinook, which is really good news. They're showing signs of resilience. And so there's a lot of information in here. I'll just try to hit the high points. But there's a lot of volunteer effort as well as support from the community, both businesses and agencies. And we came together in 2011 through scoping meetings, and people said, river's drying up, toxic algae is developing, salmon may be going extinct. What can we do? And we came together. And our group is not an advocacy-based group. We work on solutions. We scope the community, identify needs, get resources, solve problems, come back, report. We have a very active agenda in terms of science and citizen science, the flow and temperature, toxic algae, cyanobacteria, and salmon, fall Chinook. So I'll go quickly through these things. We started monitoring water temperature because people said, I think my creek's drying up. We said, well, we could test that by taking water temperatures. And they said, let's do that. So we've deployed 154 water temperature gauges since 2012, and we have really helped them to take the pulse of the Eel River. This is one of our volunteers in Outlet Creek. Friends of Outlet helped us deploy 24 of these things in that creek around Willits, trib of the main eel, and we take pictures at each location. Sal Steinberg helped put out 26 in the Van Dusen River, and you can kind of see there where there's the cold creeks and then there's the main river, so that tells you a lot about the fish community and the river's health. Then we put together a very significant report funded by State Board and we looked at 14 million data points in the eel. And we found that the places with red circles there, they're having problems in terms of increases in water temperatures, and the places with green circles, they're actually improving. So there's recovery going on at the same time as there's trends in opposite directions. And a lot of the problems with the flow translate into problems with temperature, just as we anticipated. So here you can see Mendocino County, and creeks like Tomkai and Outlet are warming up. But there's hope, because we're working like in 10 Mile Creek, where there's a problem with flow. This is kind of all of our data looking at it in aggregate, and when the temperature starts to rise, then you can see that's actually the flow depleting. They get hot before they go dry. This is where creeks went dry in 2015, so we're able to bring this information back to the community. Neighbors work with neighbors to try to get creeks back on the surface. This is 10 Mile Creek, extraordinary tributary of the South Fork that runs through Laytonville. It didn't always dry up in the summer, so we're working with the locals there. And this is the condition of the creek in 2018, but it still has coho. It still has one of the best runs of Chinook in the basin. So we have a Prop 1 grant working with the 10 Mile Creek Watershed Council, going to get a couple tributaries back on the surface, Carrie. And this is a community of conscience in the eel, and these are the tributaries that we're targeting, and it also has a science component. So if we prove that we can get creeks back on the surface with goodwill of the people, that could be duplicated elsewhere. Berkeley helped us study cyanobacteria. Nobody wants anything that can kill your dog. It's a product of climate change to some degree. This is where we deployed our sensors, also the flow gauges that we rely on to tune them up. And it turns out that toxic cyanobacteria are most prevalent in the South Fork, but in some dry years, they are actually all over the basin. So the little plus marks at the top of this grant, or this chart, show the most acute problems. And, but you can see the South Fork has more values in the higher range, and that's where we have problems with non-point source pollution and also depletion of flow. And so this is kind of the way they arrayed. Biggest problem in 2013 was lower in the South Fork. Next year it moved up the South Fork somewhat. 2015 it was all over the place. 2016 it was non-existent. So it's flow dependent. And now there's a problem between the dams. There's a new species, Formidium, now called Microchelius. And actually, that's a whole another question, but that's of interest because it actually is a cold water loving species that is still toxic to animals and humans. And so we're not going to be doing our typical cyanotoxin monitoring going forward, but we've discerned actions that we really need to do to clean up the river and get this problem, reversed at some point. And to do that, we're going to go with the Chemise and Woodman Creek and do watershed councils therein. And you guys a year ago said that you'd write us a letter of recommendation. We're almost ready. These are two really, really key creeks in Mendocino and Humboldt that can be anchors of recovery for steelhead. And Fall Chinook, this is good news. I brought a DVD, but people can stream it on our website, eelriverrecovery.org. This is the Eel River Fall Chinook population since 2012. So here it is in a nutshell. We had upwards of 50,000 fish in 2012. They dipped as low as 10 to 15,000 in 2015. And now they're rebounding and oscillating in the 15 to 25,000 range, and I expect it to increase. So this is good news. Some of the cylinders in the Eel River car are starting to malfunction, but overall, the ecosystem function is highly supportive of Chinook, and we have good prospects going forward. Again, the fish kind of tell us the same thing that the temperature and the algae stuff, that where the green circles are, those are areas of strong recovery of Chinook salmon in the Eel River, and where the red ovals and circles are, that's where we have challenges. So we need to work to meet those challenges. We counted Fall Chinook this last year. The early run was in peril because the riffles were so shallow. So we're working in the lower river to improve habitat conditions. And then also there's the fish got sick down there in 2015, so we want to redevelop pools and develop better holding habitat that are less stressful. This is a bank that's failing where huge amounts of ag land are being lost, and it could be anchored and we could restore salmon habitat there, just above Fernbridge. And this is where we did that on the Mad River. So bioengineering is what it's called. So we need to restore the lower river because every fish in the entire basin has to go through there. There's also a great deal of poaching, some of it right along the old NCRA right-of-way. So what about if we had a trail there? And so we are working on a Lower Eel River Salmon Parkway concept that has both habitat restoration components and a trail. And everybody's for a trail. It's like 99%. Community health, quality of life, ecotourism. It would be a segment on McGuire's Great Redwood Trail segment. And then City of Fortuna's already bought in. They're getting a piece of parkland there, and part of the acquisition may include the gravel bar on the far side. And in the distance there, if you see the pampas grass, that should be cottonwood gallery forest. So this actually may not just stimulate the trail in Fortuna and recreational access for the citizens, but also restoration of the Lower Eel River cottonwood gallery forest. Mr. Van Hatten from Fish and Game in Eureka had such vision. And so a lot of good things happening in the eel. Thank you. I haven't been before you in a couple of years, but I really appreciate the opportunity to address you. And if anybody's old-fashioned, I got a DVD, and otherwise, it's on the web. How'd they do, Estelle?
You did really, really well. Thank you, Pat. I understand that is Mark Wheatley here too? No.
I forgot this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Those guys are doing good too. I mean, when you look at the tail of like yellow leg frogs in California or the turtle, they're not doing so good. In the eel, you have to watch where you step or you step on frogs. You have to watch where you drive because certain times of year, the turtles cross the road. So the eel has tremendous resilience, and the community within it, I think, wants to foster that.
Great. Thank you very much, Pat. Any comment on this from the commissioners? Any comment from the public? Welcome, Rick.
Hello, Madam Chairman, and thank you for having me. I am concerned about the algae bloom in the Eel River. I have had numerous discussions with on public meetings and with the North Coast Water Quality Management District regarding sewer plant construction in cities and towns along the Eel River. And it's my opinion that the algae blooms are partially, that the sewage treatment plants and the secondary effluent released by those are partially responsible for those algae blooms. And I have a solution for you. It's one that you've never heard of. Have you ever heard of Anodonta californicis? That is a bivalve. I know you have, Estelle. That is a bivalve, a little clam or mussel, similar to our clams out on the beach. They have a neck with two tubes running up the neck, hence the term bivalves. Anyway, they're extremely important in cleaning up our environment. Each one of these animals, and by the way, this animal here is native to the Eel River. Each one of these animals, they like E. coli. They have a smile on their face when they get near E. coli, so they would do well in waters that have a high E. coli content. So they like E. coli. They cleanse per animal 25 to 50 gallons of water per day per animal. And now that is significant. I know some of you are involved in real estate, the old adage, make money while you sleep. This is our perfect solution. If we can create an environment where this animal proliferates, then we've got part of the problem solved already. The other aspect of this is that the eggs, when they reproduce, the eggs are carried in the gills of the salmon, so they're somewhat related to the health of the salmon population. So there has been some degradation of the watershed in the Eel River, but if we could begin to correct some of that degradation, and then with a focus on this little critter here called Anodonta californicis, we would have we'd have it made. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Pat. I thought you were going to bring something else up. Thank you very much. All right. Let's see. Thank you very much for that presentation. That will bring us to...
A quick break.
Yeah, if you would like, we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be back for our last couple of items. Thank you. No, that's good. We're all human.
Yeah. I jump on that. There's a lot of things that if somebody tells me, I don't. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get to that later. If you say Form 700, I go, the FPPC. You know, because at this point, it's like a traffic cop pulling. Yeah. It's like a traffic cop that pulls you over for, gives you a ticket for a light out rather than telling you to fix it. You know what I mean? We'll chat for a quick second.
It's something that attracts people. I think you'll be able to get more information. You can control that if you the whole way.
We appreciate the fact that you're all chatting and everything, and that's a wonderful thing. But I'd like you to take any conversations outside in the hallway if you're interested. The other thing I wanted to say is we have a lot of people here who have traveled a long way, so we like to move these meetings along and make it that you can have a safe trip home. So thank you, everybody. We're going to go on to the next item, and this is the Conflict of Interest Code Annual Review and Appeal, and our Clerk of the Board, Kathy Hayes, will fill us up in on what we need to do with regard to that. If you maybe bring it down a little further, okay? Yeah.
Can you hear me? I have a pretty loud voice, so. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, each year the Political Reform Act requires state and local governmental agencies to adopt a conflict of interest code. And before you is the conflict of interest code for the Ocean River Commission. And I'll go through it briefly. Based on the research that I've done for the past few years related to the conflict of interest code and the Ocean River Commission, there really has been no changes with respect to commission membership, alternate commissioners, or consultants. So this pretty much becomes business as usual. It's a formality that your commission needs to adopt the conflict of interest code, and I need to complete a form that has to go back to the Fair Political Practices Commission stating that you've reviewed it annually and that you've adopted it. So I'm asking that your commission adopt the existing conflict of interest code so that I can forward it to the FPPC.
Thank you, Kathy. Commissioner Brown?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Kathy. This is great. I so move approval of the Ill-Russian River Commission Conflict of Interest Code.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Thank you very much. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I wonder if any politician in history has voted no on a conflict of interest issue. But
They would be ill-advised to do
Yet there are
so.
conflicts of interest at certain times. You know? Anyways, sorry.
Yeah. No. You're great. You're a pleasure to work with, Commissioner Gore. You
Oh,
really are.
God, this stuff can get so bad, can it? Like, at least with you guys, I'm not with my board right now. You know what I mean? Be a little loose, swing loose.
Swing loose. So we now have an update from our treasurer, Commissioner Brown, on the finances of the Ill-Russian River Commission.
So, Madam Chair, when you said, what should I call you when you do the financial update? What should I call you? Well, treasurer. So I just want you to know I'm really not the treasurer.
You're not the
Just looks
treasurer.
good.
Okay. We're gonna, you don't want that?
So-
Okay.
We have the parliamentarian over here, secretary.
So I did bring it. As you can see, past administrative duties have cleared their costs that they incurred for probably a year and a half, maybe two. The cost is also in regards to PSAs. PSAs. Wrong. PRAs. Requests, a lot of scanning had to go on, and review of emails, and everything that occurred as a result of that. So the balance, and just for all you commissioners, I've been on here since 2009 on the commission, and I don't ever remember paying dues all that time. We usually just move forward because we had accumulated quite a bit of money in the account, and so we waived paying the fee. And we did it, and I'm not exactly sure what meeting. So like for Mendocino County, not knowing, what you have in your budgets, it was not approved as an expenditure. So then you have to go through a whole other process. But as you can see, beginning balance and ending balance, that's where we are. I suggested if we're collecting dues, we do have to do a yearly budget. So, the normal process. And I was asked for minutes. I was asked for, when I was trying to take it before our board, to maybe get early payments. So I don't know. This is what we have. The auditor ran 3 pages off for me, so not a lot of detail on 2 and 3. So that is what we have.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. So we have discussed paying dues at earlier meetings, and as I recall, what we had agreed on was $3,000 per county. If that's something that we want to revise at this point, that's fine with me. What we really need is some clarity so that we can send out invoices, and then we have to work with Mendocino County Auditor Controller, because that is the designated financial role for the Eel-Russian River Commission. So I'll poll you guys. What do you think of? Yes?
My thing is it's not really to me, a qualitative discussion. It's more of an empirical one.
Mhm.
It's like, what do you need and charge us? Because, at that point, I go back and I don't get into the details. I don't get into other stuff. It's like, you know, I mean, I just want to make sure that the staff time that is allocated by you and Mendocino County is covered appropriately. And the other side, I would say, is that if you're adding staff time, I would encourage you to credit that. You know, as much as I'd say, like, if you know, $3,000 or whatever, make sure that it quantifies what it is for you to put staff time into something, is my point. Because I just want us all to make sure that our participation is valued here.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown?
Thank you. And $3,000 a year was part of the original dues, or how did we come up with that?
You know, from when I've been involved, that was the figure that was tossed out, and we've actually budgeted for it in Humboldt County
I just
on a yearly
didn't know.
basis. We just haven't been invoiced, so I think we want to get it to the point where we do invoice it, because right now we're saying we're going to have 4 meetings this year. I think there's quite a lot of activity. As you said, the PRA took some money from the budget last year, you know.
And we really were only meeting 2 times a year.
Exactly.
Now we're meeting 4 times a year. And without the drive of clerking staff, you know, I know it costs around $400 of staff time. And that historically has been charged back to the commission.
Yep.
So, anyway.
So can we, first of all, so is the $3,000 figure amenable to everybody? Yeah?
I feel it is.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I'm not sure about the process, because I do know that Humboldt has already allocated the funding. If you guys haven't done it, I don't know if you need to go through a process with your boards, or do you have to wait now?
Last discussion was, I mean, how do we do it? Do you want me to go back and
We'll
initiate? Do you invoice? I mean, if you invoice,
We'll invoice
pay,
you, yeah.
right?
Okay.
And then I just will send a note. I mean, it would be helpful if that invoice is sent to me, and I'll forward
Okay.
it to the county administrator.
Okay.
Because then it's not like something that gets lost in 1,000 other invoices that go into the
Okay.
CAO's office.
Yeah, I think there was something sent out.
To me?
To all of us.
See, you're not supposed to say that.
Well, I can see Kathy there. She has a
Well,
bottle in her hand.
Supervisor, you voted on that motion last
She
week.
was-
Why are you questioning it now?
Miss Hayes.
Okay, so she sent it, and I will forward it to the county administrator, and we will remit payment, and we'll make sure that the water agency fills it to the county administrator's office, yeah.
Yes. And just for a bit of clarification through the chair, the invoices that I sent you, we're kind of in flux here, we're in transition. I wasn't sure whether or not your counties had been invoiced for the current fiscal year that we're in. Your fiscal year runs from July 1 to June 30th, and so you're coming upon a new fiscal year. So I'm anticipating that your commission will be adopting a budget at your May meeting. And what I could do, if it's agreeable to the commission, is I could estimate those costs and include that in a proposed budget that comes before you, so that you can actually see what we anticipate those costs to be and see whether or not the fee of $3,000 will cover that. We obviously want to have additional funds available for things like PRAs and things that we can't anticipate that might come up that the commission needs to deal with. So, yes, and on that note, the invoices that you did receive are for the current fiscal year come July 1, based upon the action your board just took, you would be receiving another invoice, and
So-
Commissioner Gore, I will send it directly to you this time.
And the county administrator.
And the county
Both of
administrator.
us together.
So we'll wait till the new invoice, because to go back was pretty difficult. And when I started asking the question, they said, well, you have to do an agenda item because it's an addition to the budget. We need to see your, the commission's budget. We need to see the approved minutes. And I'm just going, okay.
Well, and to put an item on your board agenda costs more than $3,000. Let's realize that. right? That sounds asinine, but it's actually true.
So we can expect the new invoices and go through the process, okay?
Sure, I think we've got great.
Oh, God.
We're going
Well-
through the budget process now, so yes, I did submit.
I do submit.
Wonderful. Well, thank you thank you all for clarifying that. Now we can move forward. And next, we have commissioner reports. Do any of the commissioners have something to report?
I was going to bring fish counts.
You don't want to give me the mic again, do you?
At the Van Arsdale Station at the Fish Hotel, but Allison gave those, so it was covered.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Gore?
Thanks for fixing the roads on the way up. That was nice.
They're doing pretty good. Yeah.
Thanks for fixing the roads on the way up. I think you can tell I'm ready for it to be Friday. We go to Lost Coast on the way home. Is that a good enough announcement?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, have a burger and a beer. I'm not
That's
in a county
great.
car. Anyways, I won't go to a dispensary though,
Did you go? Oh.
because I'm an elected official. I don't do that.
Oh, yeah, right.
I'm gonna roll. Stop me, please. Unelected and recalled.
Commissioner Crandall.
So I have met with some folks from Lake Pillsbury who are affected by this project, and I have been starting to look into other, other projects and trying to figure this out. So.
Thank you, and again, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on board. And thank you to everybody who here today. Basically, my report is it's a great project. I feel very grateful to everybody who's helping us, and look forward to our next meeting in Lake County on May 24th, 10 a.m., 255 North 4th Street. That's it. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Much love. Have a great weekend.
We had a break, so we could have a break. Oh, that's cool. Oh, sorry.
We're already done.
Everybody
I'm
sit
already in
back
the parking
down.
lot.
Sit back down. We are not adjourned. We're reconvening.
But my ride is leaving.
What's that?
I was teasing her.
Yeah.
No, I'm sitting here and I'm in supervisor's mode. We take our public comment on non-agenda items at the beginning of the meeting. Sorry, everybody. It is time now for public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Yeah.
Commissioners, thank you. I will try to keep this short this time. I just wanted to bring up one item. Carrie earlier was announced that there was 95 salmon, 159 steelhead at Van Arsdale this year. And there's a couple things that I'd like to point out. There's a website that I invite everyone to check out. It's called hatcherywildcoexist.com. And it basically shows that the hatchery fish and wild fish can live together and provide opportunities for fishing. My problem is, I've been around all my life on the eel and the Russian, and we used to take eggs at Van Arsdale Station, and we have a report that the eggs were hatched out, but almost all those eggs were put in adjacent rivers and not put back in the eel because they felt there was plenty of king salmon in the Eel River. Well, why aren't we taking our select brood stocks right now that we have, the wild fish, and hatching them out and put them back in the Eel River? It has to be done so they're all genetically monitored. And while we're waiting for this so-called dual basin solution, in 4 or 5 years, we'll have king salmon back here in the ocean for the fishermen and the native tribes and whoever else that depend on the salmon and get our ecosystem going again. I know the problem is that there's certain entities that don't believe in hatcheries. Hatcheries have been terrible over the past, but they're getting better, and there is solutions to make this work. And I just don't know why we've done totally away with other solutions to help the fish population. It's working on the Sacramento. We're getting the salmon back, and I think we just gave up the fight. And I think Fish and Wildlife has really let us down, and for not maintaining the fish ladder or imposing on PG&E to get that fish ladder in operational. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So I just wanted to add a little bit to that. As some of you may know, I was the executive director of the Mattole Salmon Group for the last 8 years. And in the Mattole, we had a Chinook rearing program where we did get brood stock, and we hatched eggs, and did it through a hatch box program. Very low scale, low cost, working with the Department of Fish and Game at the time. And last winter, we had the largest run of return adult Chinook salmon in 35 years. Now, did that hatchery enhancement effort or our hatchbox effort create those results? We don't know, because it's so difficult to get monitoring money to be able to say. But we do know that when we had that large run, the largest in 35 years last year, the other rivers did not experience that same jump. And so it wasn't ocean conditions. It was something going on in the Mattole. And so there is something to be said for trying to supplement when it's done with genetic approaches with the department and with local landowners, done at a scale where it can be really cost effective. So I just wanted to add a little credence to that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Vivian?
Vivian Hillowell, Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations. I really appreciate you putting on these meetings so that we can have a conversation between the 4 counties that are all involved in the Potter Valley project, it turns out. And especially want to thank Kathy Hayes for putting up a great website with lots of information on it. Yesterday, Caltrout, I think maybe it was Wednesday, Caltrout put on a great set of presentations at the River Lodge on the Pike Minnow in the Eel River. And we had Steve Williams from Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, who administers the Columbia River Sport Reward Program, down to give a presentation on how they do it in the Columbia. They pay anglers to catch the pike minnow, and they turn them in. They've had some success with that approach. We had a presentation on the genetic modification possibilities that could follow reducing the populations. And we videoed that hearing presentations and hope to have it posted online very soon, and possibly request that you might have a link to the videos for people who are interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Any further public comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. And let me make sure that I read all the way down to the bottom of the page here. Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your help with that.
You got me too excited about leaving.
Thanks, you guys.
Ryan's coming back.